Okay, and we are going
This
live.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, you ready, Casey?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. Today is Monday, October 26, 2020. It's 3:01 p.m. and this is the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners meeting. We already did a sound check a little earlier, so we know we can hear everybody. Today, I believe it is just myself and Commissioner Hall. Commissioner Hunt is on an excused absence, but we do still have a quorum with two commissioners here. First up today is the adoption of the consent calendar. I'll let Casey scroll. And these are items of a routine nature, but either commissioners or staff can poll for additional information or discussion if needed.
Madam Chair, I would be happy to make a motion for adoption of the consent calendar as presented.
All right, and I will second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, motion carries. All right, next up under reports, we kind of have multiple reports under our first one, Echo Mountain Complex Fire Update, kind of several things we're going to be talking about today under this category. First up is continued fee waiver discussion, including construction excise tax. This is something we kind of started discussion on last week at our Board of Commissioners meeting. We asked Director Husing and others to kind of come back to us this week with a more thoughtful discussion and for some things to consider. So Wayne, do you want to kick it off, or Anno? Who's starting?
Sure, I can start off maybe with some overview, and then Anno can give you some more details. So we have examined what other jurisdictions have done. I've actually gotten a copy of the action that was taken by the Marion County Board of Commissioners. And to give you an idea of what they looked at, they actually waived the building and septic fees to the extent that they were local fees for any damaged or destroyed home within their impacted wildfire areas. And they did it in two different ways. They granted a waiver of those fees for those who had not yet, in fact, most of the properties have not yet applied for any of these fees. They're still in the cleanup phase. But for anybody who may have actually gone forward and was moving forward at a little faster track, they offered refunds of the fees as they were paid. I have been examining just the legal authority for us to do this. It falls in several different areas, but mostly in ORS Chapter 401, our authority under ORS 203.035 over matters of county concern, and then specifically in the ordinance which adopts the emergency services. It grants you the authority in an emergency situation to waive or modify fees. So this is something you can move forward with if you so desire. And in the interim, I think that Mr. Husing and Christina Scheer, our finance director, have been talking a little bit about the financial impacts of doing a fee waiver on a couple scales. And I think Mr. Husing actually has a proposal. So I'll turn it over to Anno at this point and let him weigh in.
Thank you, Wayne. Afternoon, commissioners. Anno Husing. A week ago, you asked me to come back with a proposal that really didn't get into whether or not we should waive fees, but if we are going to, if you are going to take action to waive fees, how would we do it? And as Wayne just explained, there were several counties that have done this, but the Marion County approach, I think, got after what I was talking about during the last meeting, which was let's create some kind of an opportunity to make sure that the people that really need these a fee waiver are going to be the ones to get it, rather than folks that maybe, I'm not saying they don't need it, or everybody sure would like to have a subsidy of some kind, but those are really businesses that are now trying to potentially purchase some of these properties or something like that. They're just a very different groups of people affected by this. So again, my recommendation is, speaking with a number of other people and looking at what the other counties are doing, is to go with the Marion County approach, which really singles out those homes that are primary residences or the only residence that people own. So I know there are some people that they have a second home in Panther Creek that was affected by this. Again, my recommendation is that if this is your second home, and some of those people I've spoke to, they're also insured. They really don't need this assistance. So again, I would go with the Marion County approach, which provides the fee waivers for if this is your primary or original residence or only residence. And the one part of the Marion County code that after talking with our staff, we had a meeting this morning about it, I would not try to implement the part of that code that provides an opportunity for their jurisdiction to recoup revenues for if a house that's being replaced is larger than the original structure, then they have some kind of metrics to try to provide a fee for that piece that's above it. After speaking with our staff this morning and going over that proposal in depth, it occurred to us that the cost of trying to figure that out and find that little tiny piece of revenue will exceed staff time. It just wouldn't be worth it to go get it. And so, and again, I think the larger point is that by only providing fee waivers to the residences, the original residence or primary residence, that really gets after this issue in a major way in terms of making sure that people that don't need help are not going to be getting some of these resources. So that's my recommendation: is go with the Marion County approach minus that one piece they had in there, which was trying to get that marginal extra piece of revenue just in case somebody replaced a home with a larger structure than they had intended in the first place. In round numbers, and these are just estimates because out of the 290 or 86, it is 286 total residences, 270, I believe, are manufactured homes. If every single one, if we waive the $339.20 fee for a placement permit for a manufactured home, if all of those, if every single one of those came in over the next couple of years, that would in effect be $76,000 and roughly $700 of lost revenue to the county by providing that fee waiver on the manufactured home. And if you look at the real money, though, is going to be in terms of it's going to be basically $1,000 a piece to waive the septic fees. Again, I'm using round numbers for the purposes of ballparking the estimates. Over the next 2 or 3 years, as those come in, that could be a hit to our budget of $257,400 if each one of those we gave a fee waiver to. And so, and if there's 60 stick-built homes, roughly they're going to be like $1,000 a piece. So, that could be another $60,000 total. So that's really what we're looking for in terms of the impacts if we were to go ahead with what I've proposed and what you've already been looking at. And again, I think we need to be seeing this in a larger picture. These revenues foregone are not going to happen all in one budget year. What we've learned from other people in other settings is that it takes 3 or 4 or 5, even up to years, if not up to a decade, to see all these properties come back online. So it's not like these revenue losses will be felt in 1 year. It's going to be strung out over a couple of years. Plus, let's understand, our department is still very, very busy. So it's not like there's been we're dealing with a drop off in revenue. Our biggest dilemma is not necessarily being shortchanged in terms of financially being able to fund the department. Our problem is being able to cope with this additional workload, given the fact that we could use a few extra staff, even without this fire, to be able to do what we do. So again, I think my report to you is very clear. The recommendation is take the Marion County model. Don't try that second piece that captures that little incremental additional fees that could be collected above what they were going to replace anyway. And I think we're going to be able to cope with the differences in the lost revenue. And after all, isn't it really about trying to help all those people that went through such a horrible experience, and everybody doing their part to make what was an awful situation just a little bit better? I'll be happy to stand down and answer any questions or participate in dialogue.
Thanks, Director Husing. Appreciate that. I think Wayne mentioned that Christina might have had something she wanted to add to this, and maybe I'll let her go and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Well, Anna and I have had a brief discussion about this. The one thing I just want to point out to the board is that the planning department is not a revenue neutral department. It does have a certain element of general funding to it. It doesn't recover 100% of its costs through fees. And so any reduction in revenue while having a level expenditure load will essentially drop to the bottom line of the general fund. Now, that's not to say that this is necessarily a bad decision. And I also point out that it's highly unlikely that this fee revenue would have occurred had the event not happened. So to a certain extent, it could be construed as a windfall in terms of revenue. So it only makes sense to waive these fees. I just do want to point out that there is potential for there to be general fund impact. And because this also could be construed or possibly have the result of dampening other construction going on in the county while this reconstruction is going on, there's some potential for a downturn. I do not in any way, shape, or form think it's going to be the full amount of fee waiver.
Okay, thank you. And I should have introduced you. I'm sorry. Christina Shear is our Director of Finance here in Lincoln County.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess I'll make a few comments and then see if Commissioner Hall has comments. And I believe it was Commissioner Hall that reached out and talked to the school district as well. So we'll let her report on that. But in terms of what both of our directors have given us here, I have read the Marion County model and I'm generally supported. I'm glad to hear that you've kind of turned away from the additional fee piece that they have on, and if the footprint is any larger, because I felt like it potentially is splitting hairs. How much larger, 50 feet larger or 100 feet larger or what have you. So I think it kind of keeps it simplistic. Without that piece. And also there's a lot of, the land that's out there isn't getting any larger. It is still the footprint. So, it's not like the lots are getting bigger where you can necessarily build something a lot larger anyways. I guess the comment on lost revenue I just want to make is while I'm generally supportive of doing this, I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a situation where we lose an amount of revenue that's going to affect staff, that then we're going to be slowed down in helping people rebuild because we don't have the staff to actually do it. But it sounds like on the projections and forecasting that we have, that that's not going to be the case. Because my biggest thing here is just that we have the staff to be able to help people move forward as best we can. And it sounds like that's not going to impact that. So those are my two comments that I have. Claire, do you have questions for Director Husing or Director Shear? And then after that, maybe you can get into the to what you found out about the school tax.
Sure. Yes, I do have some questions for our directors and some thoughts. First, I want to say thank you for bringing this forward. When I originally brought this to the table last week, I just felt instinctively it is the right thing to do in terms of the expense that people are going to face in rebuilding. Yes, it may be only a small picture of their overall budget, but every dollar helps. And I hope it will send a powerful message to the citizens that we do care and that we want to do everything within our power to help them rebuild and rebuild as quickly as possible. As I've continued to turn this over in my own mind, in a way, I'm wondering if this could be, advantageous not only to our financial bottom line, but other taxing entities in the long run, because let's say, consider a scenario where when property tax time rolls around next year, this year's bills have already gone out. If there is a new home sitting on that lot, and it's not still vacant because the homeowner is going to be able conceivably to move forward with rebuilding a little quicker because of this waiver, that, from another perspective, maybe it's beneficial to our bottom line. So just for clarification, I've got the Marion County order sitting in front of me. And other than the provision about trying to capture that tiny increment if a larger house goes in, are you also recommending that we go with the time frame they put in their order? Their order is retroactive to September 8th, essentially the date of the fire, and you indicated to us that only a few people have actually made applications for rebuilding at this point, and that doing a fee waiver is not a problem. But with a termination date on this policy of 5 years, or September 8th, 2025, just from an operational standpoint, and I don't know if our counsel, Mr. Belmont, would want to weigh in, wouldn't setting a 5-year time period like that, 3 years, or just making it open-ended, operationally, what makes the most sense in your view?
I'd be happy to jump in before Wayne Belmont does, but and thank you for the question, Commissioner Hall, because you did express to me before the meeting that it would be helpful if we had an idea of how far along we are on any of this rebuilding, and I got zero problems with, and we brought that up this morning with our staff, because I said, let's talk about how many actual permits have been submitted so far. And in terms of manufactured home replacement permits, there's only been 7 or 8. I think 3 or 4 of those will qualify as original homes. So in terms of issuing refunds to those individuals, that's something that's not going to be unduly burdensome for our staff, because we're really just at the start of this. So if you were to, I think that would be the appropriate response, is to go back to the date of the origins of the fire. And so if you were the owner at the time of the fire, though, that's important, because already I think what I've heard through the grapevine, and I can't verify this, but I believe it to be true, that some property owners have discovered, they've looked at their own internal budgets and whether they were insured or not. And I think they concluded they'll never be able to afford to get back on their property. So some people are already electing to sell their damaged properties and move. So that's a phenomenon that's happening. So again, I got no problem. I have zero problems with making this retroactive to the 8th. And unless Commissioner Belmont has an issue with taking it out 5 years.
Belmont.
I said, did I demote him, or did I
Not sure.
Wayne, unless he's got an issue with it, I think 5 years makes sense, because that's how long it's going to take for some of these properties to come in.
Okay.
That's what we're hearing from other people. But again, whatever you guys want to do is what we'll do.
I would just, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, I'm comfortable with that. And depending on your thoughts, Commissioner Jacobson, I would propose that we give direction to staff to bring back a formal order that reflects the discussion and direction we've provided here today, to essentially adapt the Marion County model, providing building and septic fee waivers for replacement of primary residences, and the time frame being September 8th, 2020 to September 8th, 2025.
Commissioners,
Yes.
hi, this is Council Belmont. So can I just suggest one thing that I did not see in the Marion, and Anna, you can help me a little bit with the properties that were impacted by the wildfire, is that you may also want to waive these fees for multifamily rental properties. Those that rent for, long-term rental. I don't know whether or not, I was kind of surprised we didn't see that. It was a question I had. I was going to wait until after this meeting to really get more details on it, but I'm somewhat surprised that it's just the primary residence and not also for multifamily rental properties, residential rentals. Is that something you want us to explore?
I would say yes. I mean, my head starts going, how do you verify it was a rental, and then how do you ensure it's a rental after? I mean, that's where my head goes. So yeah, sure, I'm a rental, and then you're not. But I do feel like there was a lot of rentals in the area that provided workforce housing for people, and that's really important. that we don't lose all of that. And so I would say it's worth exploring as long as there is some kind of a way that, you could verify that or state intent or what it is afterwards. What I, don't want to do, as Director Husing pointing out, is have this be a program for people with second homes or vacation rentals or that kind of a situation. So as long as we can find a way to kind of navigate through that, but I think it's worth looking at, certainly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add that I am in favor of going back and doing the refunds to the few people that have already reached out and started that process and backdating this. I think that's appropriate. 5 years seems slightly long to me, but I'm not necessarily against that. And I will say that Director Husing is right that a lot of other communities have said it has taken that long. So as long as we have appropriate language in there on, you do have to prove you're an affected property and that kind of stuff, I think I'm okay with the 5-year mark.
And then the second kind of policy issue I wanted to discuss was, is this something that applies to the property or the property and the owner? And so that the person who is eligible for this fee waiver has to have been the property owner at the time of the fire. If, as Anno indicated, some of these properties are sold to someone else, do you want to grant that waiver to the new owner?
Madam Chair, could I jump in on that? Because, this discussion, it just kind of triggers in my mind one fire survivor that I've been in touch with. And, these questions, I think, would directly bear on his situation. He was long-term renting a manufactured home that was destroyed by the fire. And the property owner, after doing due diligence, has just decided, it's not cost effective for him to rebuild, but the former tenant does have the resources and right now is in negotiation to purchase the property, and he wants to put a replacement home on the property. So, even though he was not the property owner at the time of the fire, this will be his new primary residence if it works out. Is there a way, kind of a clean, consistent way to look at the eligibility of someone like that?
Yeah, I would just add, I've had similar conversations with people in that exact same situation that had been long-term rentals, and how I look at Council Belmont's question on whether or not to do that is really another question, which is, what's the goal of doing this? What are we trying to achieve here? And in my head, the goal is trying to get that area rebuilt and trying to get it rebuilt with affordable housing, with workforce housing. That's the goal, is to get this area rebuilt so that people, our residents, can live there. And so when I make that the goal, the answer to me becomes that yes, it might be appropriate to have a secondary owner, if that's not the original owner when the house burned, to be able to get that fee, because the whole point is to be able to get it rebuilt. So that's kind of the way I answer that question. Again, I would want some caveats there. We're talking building it for primary residential, or building it for long-term rental type of thing. Do we want to say you can sell it 8 times and have someone finally rebuild? I don't know, that seems a little weird to me. So maybe there's some things we need to walk down. But again, the goal in my mind is to create this program to help get the area rebuilt with workforce and family housing. That's the goal. So then I think that that's an appropriate conversation to have on how we would do that. Because if there is people in our community that want to buy those properties and want to put houses back on them and potentially live there themselves, that is in line with the goal.
I agree.
In my mind.
I agree. So sounds like we've got consensus for direction to staff on this.
We will draft up the appropriate order to put this in place then for your consideration, hopefully by next week.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, you asked me if I could talk about the school construction excise tax. This was an issue that Mr. Husing raised during last week's discussion, that not only do we have the county fees, but also in 2007, the Oregon legislature passed a law allowing school districts to charge a construction excise tax, I believe, for both residential and commercial properties, correct, Mr. Husing?
I'm less sure about the commercial, but probably so. We just don't have that much commercial in the county. So it's
Right,
almost, but
but it does
yes,
apply.
it's a surcharge, a one-time surcharge on new construction that goes to that the Lincoln County School District would get. And we, by the way, we collect that fee when we issue building permits. So we're quite familiar with the having to collect it and what it does in terms of adding the cost to the development.
Right. So I reached out to the school board chair, also have had conversations with Mr. Belmont. Then I contacted Rob Bovet, our former Lincoln County District Attorney, who is the legal counsel now for Association Counties. And also Representative David Gomberg was looped into the conversation. And we ended up kind of having to do a deep dive into the exact wording and intent of that original law. And what the law says is that a school district may charge this construction excise tax. So, the initial read or thought was, well, if they may choose to collect it, then wouldn't it be logical that they could also choose to waive it in a situation like this? Well, and at least according to the Legislative Council office in Salem at the Capitol, the answer to that is no, that they say their read of the statute is if the district imposes the tax, they have to collect it equally on everyone, and that they don't have the power to do selective waivers. So Rob Bovet has already drafted a legislative concept for a bill that would amend that 2007 legislation and give a district specific authority to waive the fee for people rebuilding after a fire. And my understanding is Representative Gomberg will work to move this forward, possibly if, that apparently there may be a special legislative session before the end of the year. And if that happens, maybe even he might be able to bring it forward then. If not, he would bring it forward during next year's regular legislative session. But I guess the message to the public is, it's out of our hands at this point. We're legally obligated to continue collecting the fee, but Representative Gomberg has identified this issue, and I believe he is actually part of a legislative work group that's looking at more broadly at some of the issues related to fees, zoning, permitting, and whether there are any obstacles in terms of state statute, state regulation that could be an obstacle to rebuilding that the legislature might look at modifying in some way.
Well, Commissioner Hall, they may face the same set of questions we are. How long do you go back? Would they make it retroactive, et cetera? Because at least if they make it retroactive, people can start budgeting. If they send that signal, people can start, budgeting and anticipate perhaps having to pay the fee for now, but then coming back in January and being reimbursed. But again, I brought it up. I brought it up a week ago today because everybody's been asking us. And if you're going to be talking about fees, you can't not talk about that fee. And it's my understanding that an awful lot of Lincoln County residents have petitioned your office with the same question. So there was quite a groundswell, about this fee issue, and I completely understand why. And I'm glad we got our arms around it. But again, I didn't mean to make life difficult for the school district. It's just that it was already happening.
No, you raised a very legitimate question.
That had to get figured out.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully a resolution is in the works, and if we have helped kind of move the ball down the court, to use a football or a basketball analogy, then I'm glad, because I think the message we're all trying to send at every level is, to the greatest extent possible, we want to facilitate rebuilding and not put up roadblocks for people.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hall, on that. So it sounds like Representative Gomberg is trying to make some type of fix for that. All right, number 2, under Echo Mountain Complex Fire Update, temporary emergency accommodation for fire impacted persons. And I know we have some exciting news we want to talk about at some point, which is what happened at the E-Board on Friday. Before we get into that, I feel like we do have a little bit of a situation brewing with temporary emergency accommodations for fire impacted persons. So I kind of want to talk about that first. Council Belmont, do you want to kind of provide the context of what is happening right now with Red Cross, or?
Yeah, sure. Although let me, this particular matter, I was going to talk about that during the housing mission discussion. This particular matter, actually, and it's, excuse me for the wording, I was actually borrowing it from another jurisdiction in the way they actually worded their emergency order. And what this really is a number of jurisdictions across the state have basically relaxed or are waiving the enforcement of provisions in their code that preclude the placement of temporary housing like recreational vehicles on property as a result of the fire emergency, and allowing people to live in those particular accommodations for a period of time as another tool kind of in the toolkit here to deal with the immediate housing need that's caused by the displacement of a large number of people. So we've been looking at some examples of what's been done in other parts of the state, and are really, I think we've got Assistant Counsel Jerry Herbage has drafted up an order that we could present to you. We weren't ready to do it yet because we wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the details. And probably the key function here is to basically say we're not going to enforce current prohibitions against this in certain areas of the county, unincorporated areas of the county, subject to some conditions, and Jerry can discuss what those conditions are. But the real difference between the various jurisdictions is that some places require you to get a permit to do a placement of its temporary accommodation, and some just simply waive it and say that they're not going to do the enforcement. And so we've been discussing internally in terms of making a recommendation to you, which would be the better way to do that. I think I'm sort of leaning now towards the permit side, even though I'm concerned about putting more work on Director Husing's office at a time when they're just swamped with all the stuff. But I think there's some real, there might be some good reasons. But I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Counsel Herbage, and he can kind of describe what we've been looking at.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. This is Jerry Herbage, Assistant County Counsel. And all of us in the Office of Counsel have been working on this issue. And by way of background, I just want to go over a couple of things. We all know that the Echo Mountain Complex fire destroyed some 293 homes, but not just the homes, also RVs and sanitation, water facilities, and those sorts of things, really resulting in the displacing of hundreds of individuals. Now, what's interesting is that in our Lincoln County Code, generally living in an RV is prohibited. There's a few exceptions, but that's the general rule. And in light of our situation, remember before the fire, we had a very low amount of affordable housing available in the county, and now I suppose we could say it's even much worse. So I think there's about three issues. One is, do we allow temporary housing within like RVs, that sort of thing, in the unincorporated area of Lincoln County? And we've looked at other jurisdictions that have allowed this. And some examples would be Talent, Oregon, Medford, Oregon, and Bend, Oregon. We've looked at their respective orders in each of those situations. So that would be the first question. And if you do allow it, and Wayne did a good job of outlining this, how do you do it? So some of the, like Medford does not require a permit, and like Talent and Bend do require a permit. Let me go over some of the pluses and minuses as I see it. And I've had a chance to talk to Planning and Development Department as well on this. If we do require a permit, there's a philosophical glitch somewhat in that, as I told you before, RVs are not allowed. So conceptually, I know at least John O'Leary had a concern that why are we permitting it when it's not allowed? He seems that conceptually it would make more sense not to enforce. But that's one thing to think about. We know that if there is a permit required, that there will be a significant amount of administration. And so that would be another thing. But if we do have a permit, you're going to be able to better track statistically what's going on. And so that's something to think about. Another question, so I said there's at least 3 questions you might be thinking about. The third is, if you're going to allow this waiver or allow a permit, for how long? How long does it make sense to do that? The other jurisdictions that we looked at have an expiration of September 10, 2021. When I drafted an order, which we haven't presented to you, I said September 10, but that the board can extend that period of time or shorten that time. So I want you to think about that. And we're a little bit different than cities. The counties have different concerns. So I want to go over just a few of the sideboards, and Wayne had indicated I might go through those. I'll be quick. You need to have some requirements. They might look like this. 1 or more of the occupants must have been displaced by the Echo Mountain Fire Complex fire or complex fire or another fire in Oregon. We would want there to be written permission from the owner if there's a renter type person or something. Properly connected to sanitation facilities. And that could be hooking up to someone else, or maybe the RV is self-contained and there could be an arrangement to have the waste disposed of. They have to have access to potable water. We were thinking no more than 1 RV on each lot. And it wouldn't be allowed in all zones. We're thinking residential zones or timber conservation or agricultural conservation if there's already a dwelling there. But we're thinking of not allowing this, for instance, in a commercial zone. We don't want any of these RVs on any lot undergoing post-fire cleanup. Don't want them in a floodplain. And there need to be some restrictions like not obstructing travel lanes and things like that. The order would be only for the unincorporated areas. It would not excuse the people living in the RV from DEQ environmental type violations. And there would need to be, again, expiration date. And the suggestion was September 10th, 2021 with possibility of extending or shortening. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you for that. I tried to get some notes here of where you wanted feedback. I think the expiration date you have proposed, which is, I think you said September 10th, 2021. I think that's appropriate as a date. We can always extend, additionally past it if we need to, but I think having it for 1 year would be good. As far as the general concept I'm supportive of, I will say it's a little bit deja vu-like because I sit on the DLCD commission and we just had the same conversation in temporary rulemaking last week about this very same issue across all of Oregon. It's a very similar thing that we did in that commission last week, but kind of the permit versus no permit. I have to say it's a little bit of a tough issue. I certainly see it from both sides. I understand that the Planning Commission is under a lot of staffing challenges right now, and so I get that that requires a lot of upfront work to be able to get that done. I guess what I'm worried about if we didn't do the permit system is we know from our code enforcement experience is that things can get pretty bad pretty quick. With unlicensed RV parks and people parking RVs in certain places, and the sewage issues can get very bad very quickly. And so I'm worried that if we don't do the upfront work, even though it takes staff time, the upfront work being the permit process of checking in, knowing who those people are, having them get a permit, that then we end up with a lot more work on the back end of a different apartment, trying to get kind of things cleaned up with people that unfortunately will take advantage of this and just start kind of doing stuff. So I guess even though I know it's more staff time, I lean towards the permit system for that reason, so that we kind of know where those are happening and know who those people are. And then additionally, I feel like another issue we're going to talk about here before the day's over, we're having a very difficult time getting records of all these wildfire affected people and who they are and what they need. And so it's also another way of knowing where those people are at and making sure that we can help get them connected up with services or what have you, especially after that year time period is up. If they are still actively using that, and then we know who they are, and we can say, hey, maybe there's some other opportunities here, or other ways to transition you in, or talking with some of our nonprofits or what have you. So I feel like having the permit system helps with a number of issues there. So that's kind of where I'm, I guess, leaning towards at this point. I am a fan of this in general. As for the, one person, has to have at least one person that's wildfire affected. Originally, that made me a little bit nervous to just have it be one person, but then you kind of went on and said that really only allowing one RV or motorhome per lot. And so we're not going to have a situation where we have 15 in one lot and only one person out of those 15 motorhomes is wildfire affected. So I think the rest of that policy kind of covers my concern there. So Commissioner Hall, feedback?
I'll say, Chair Jacobson, my thinking is almost exactly along the lines of yours. I do want us to do this as, one more piece of a very complicated puzzle we're looking at to try to assure people housing opportunities. I don't know, I'm just totally thinking aloud here. I am sensitive to the thought that, Mr. Hughes's shop is going to have, as he's pointed out, some definite demands put on them, not only regular construction, but processing, all the replacement construction. I'm wondering, if instead of a formal permitting process, which I think if you say to the average person, government permit, that evokes in their mind, complicated multi-page forms, payment of fees. What if instead of a formal permit, what if we had something more akin to a registration process, maybe where people could register even online to do this, kind of check the boxes, certify that they're only placing one RV on the property, that it is to house fire victims, and this kind of thing, and essentially trust them at their word. And then if there is a question or there is an issue, or September 2021 does roll around and the person indicates they still need this temporary accommodation, at least we do have that mechanism for tracking, but don't have to devote specific staff resources to verifying that, a lot of staff resources into vetting this to the extent that maybe we would under less less urgent circumstances.
I really like the idea of a registration rather than a permit, and perhaps that can be some type of smart sheet or online kind of form that you do. I think that's a good approach. Just so we know who people are, we can of course verify, the wildfire affected person's, address and sort of where they came from. I like that.
We would have, at the planning, if this was not going to be a formal permit and instead be a decline to enforce approach, we were already planning on creating basically a registry of some kind to say who was, who's doing what, when, where, how. So I think we're all on the same page about, we know we got to track this, and I recall during the MARC process when we spoke to a lot of fire victims, and sometimes they would get information they needed from us, and then we would say, hey, but make sure you get registered with our folks, so you've learned what you needed just a minute, and they would say, well, why should we do that? And we said, well, we're automatically going to make sure that everyone that's been a victim of the fire, that their permits are going to go to the front of the line. And then they said, oh, sign me up. They ran right over made sure that they were part of that registry. I think the value proposition for us keeping track of it and them phoning in and letting us know is they're not going to have Jesse Hess, our code enforcement officer, suddenly showing up saying, who are you and why are you here? There's an advantage to being part of the registry, as you pointed out, so we could potentially get some additional assistance, and to make sure that we decline to enforce, that they're not going to have somebody showing up there asking questions, because they'll be registered and we'll know who they are.
Question for Council Urbidge on this, and kind of the discussion that's unfolding here between Commissioner Hall and myself. Is there sort of a hybrid model of this approach that we talked about? We're not going to enforce versus a permit. Could you do a not going to enforce but registration required kind of situation where you need to? Yeah, I would be okay with that approach, Commissioner Hall.
Yes, I would too.
I think that's great. I think that's a good compromise, and actually, it would be very easy, in my opinion, to work that into the order that I've already worked on. So that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, if somebody is out there misbehaving or just clearly breaking the spirit of the letter of what we're trying to do here, the rule still exists. I mean, we're declining to enforce. So the minute we really figure out that somebody's not, isn't really playing ball and trying to take advantage of the situation, then they'll have a discussion with our code enforcement officer, because it will be done.
Yeah, and we're not, waiving the ability for law enforcement to get involved. We're simply saying that we're waiving code enforcement on your RV to be there. You still have to have proper sanitation, and you still have to be on good behavior like you do in any type of place you live. So
exactly. If you don't mind me jumping in there, Chair Jacobson, but Mr. Using and I through the years have had conversations more than once with maybe well-intentioned people, but essentially allowing RVs to be placed on their property to house homeless individuals. But at least I know in one case there was no sanitation hookup, and untreated waste was flowing directly into one of our rivers. And as much empathy as we have for not letting people, not allowing people to become homeless, that at the same time we have to enforce sanitation and other health and safety requirements.
Yeah. Okay, Council Urbidge, do you have kind of the clarity or direction you need to bring us something back to consider adoption on next week?
I do, and thank you very much.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next up, number 3, the housing mission. Wayne, do you want to start us off with that? I know this is kind of a big one.
It is, and commissioners, probably there's no other issue around the fire and recovery from the damage that was done than in dealing with the issue we just dealt with right there, a component of it, and that's the housing situation. And we're talking about not just housing for right now, but housing on an interim period while people make their rebuilding plans, and then the final rebuilding of the properties out there. And the way that I've learned that FEMA kind of addresses this, all the various components of this particular issue is in developing what they call a housing mission. And that's trying to bring together all the various stakeholders, all the resources that are available on either a federal, state, or a local level, and then working with community groups and most importantly with the impacted parties here to try and wrap our arms around the question of who's going to provide what kind of housing where and for how long. And that really kind of sums up the whole issue around the housing mission. So we've been working very diligently on what that entails. And again, there's lots of parts to that. I have actually had some conversations with representatives from OEM and FEMA late last week to pose to them a number of questions. I can tell you this at this point, one of the concerns I have is that we really don't have a real good feel for the data we know how many properties were damaged. We know how many people are being housed currently by Red Cross on an interim basis. What we don't know is what's happening to everybody else and what their kind of situations are going to be 2 months from now. We know the Red Cross will be available to us at least through December 31st. Although that's something that we have to keep monitoring to continue to see the efforts that are provided on this very close-in time frame. But beyond that, we're really working hard to get those alternatives out there and put together this whole package of housing options for people as we go forward. And that really is data-driven in a lot of ways, and the desires of the individuals and families that are impacted here and the resources we have to and make available have to mesh together, and that's a difficult task. So in my conversations with OEM and with FEMA, the first thing I stress to them is the need to get us this data. And so we're going to be working on that. We have a meeting set up on Thursday with representatives in which they're hopefully going to supply us with a little bit more information, but also allow us to drill down a little bit further to see, what's out there in the community, what's happening right now. I did learn that one of the tools that FEMA provides and one of the options that they give to people is to actually provide them with housing assistance in the form of funding. And the funding is what they call a fair market rental program. They actually will determine what the community's fair market rental rate is, and they will provide that rental assistance to individuals who can then go out and choose to select their own accommodations on an interim period while they do their rebuilding or replacement of their structures. I did learn on Friday that we actually qualify for an increase in that fair market rental, so that they're actually providing this assistance at 125% of the fair market rent currently to folks out here. What I don't know is how many people are taking advantage of this, number one. Number two, I don't know where they're actually finding rental units, and what we know is an incredibly tight market. Although anecdotally, I did hear that some of the people are actually renting what were formerly or may just temporarily not be vacation rentals and able to get those. But then that raised the question, well, how long do they have those available to them? So a lot of questions around that FMR or fair market rental program. But it is good news to know that we did get an increase in the value that they're providing to people to provide assistance. The other issue that the board has been very concerned with is a component of aid called direct housing. And for me, direct housing is that thing that people think of when there's a disaster, when you think of a hurricane on the East Coast or in the Gulf Coast. Quite often you would hear stories of people getting FEMA housing, modular housing, or FEMA trailers and getting those. That's a form of direct assistance where FEMA actually comes in, they provide the services, the housing, or they directly lease properties and develop them and manage those. What we learned early on was that although the state asked for 6 counties that were impacted by wildfire to be included in a direct assistance housing mission, that only 3 of the counties at this point were determined to qualify by FEMA, and Lincoln County was not one of those counties. Now, they did not say to us that we're not going to be considered for direct housing assistance in the future. We just aren't included in their first determination at this point. So I've raised some questions with the folks from OEM and FEMA, and again, they said no final decisions have been made on that. The board, though, at the behest of the commissioners, and especially Commissioner Hall, asked that we write a letter to FEMA indicating that we want to be considered as eligible for the direct housing, because that's got to be part of the overall puzzle of what we put together for housing here. So a letter was actually sent out today and included our state and federal delegation to say that we want to be included in the direct housing assistance to see where that fits into this overall plan for our housing mission. There are other options too. There's the ability to rent or provide what I'll call more of it's not really a congregate housing situation, but the FEMA often will look at places like, and I'm just going to use an example, Camp Westwind in the Lincoln City area, or the Benai Brith Camp, in which they will actually make arrangements to, for shorter term basis, to actually rent single lodges or housing within organizations like that and provide some wraparound services, including food and other services for folks. That's one of the options they look at in a housing mission and are asking us to look at. So these are just some of the questions that we have, some of the information that we need to get from OEM and FEMA in order to put together our actual plan for all the people that are going to need some kind of assistance here. I want to go back to the direct housing. They did tell me that in our situation for our wildfire, only 60 people actually qualify. If they were to provide the direct housing assistance, only 60 people qualify for that aid. So that's a significant lesser number than what we have
Wayne,
for housing needs.
Quick question on that clarification. You said 60 people. Is it 60 people or 60 like households?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking for some clarification on that particular question. It's the 60. My note says 60 people, but it might be actually 60 households that would qualify.
I think that's an important distinguishment if it's actual people, because that means there might only be 30, units or whatever, or if we're talking about 60 households. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
So no, I think that's the stuff we need to do. The other important feature that they brought to me and this really makes a whole lot of sense, is that in order to make this all work, they need to get a very good grasp of what the impacted community needs. And the only way they can do that is if people apply for aid. And, anecdotally, we hear that some people have not really stepped up and applied for anything at this point. They need assistance, but they're not, in the system, so to speak, in order to help us qualify them for additional assistance. One of the things I learned was that actually the time frame to be eligible to get some of this aid is that you have to apply by November 16th. That's the first time I'd ever heard that particular date. And I'm trying to get some clarification on that, what that's based on and what that means. But so, for instance, if someone is out there and staying with a family or friends on a temporary basis, they've stayed since the fire, but now need some assistance for a longer term basis, well, they need to have applied for some kind of assistance from FEMA to get into the system here by November 16th in order to qualify for that later assistance. So I think that we may have been working on that information through our navigator and our public information, but if that's really a hard and fast date, we need to get that out to people so that everybody, you can apply for the aid even if you don't actually utilize it, but to get into the system is extremely important. I think that I'm going to stop there on the housing mission. And again, what I'm intending to do is to request a great deal more information and clarification from folks when they come to visit with us on this coming Thursday, and then of course in the coming weeks. And it's important to note that everything's still on the table, including the direct housing assistance out there. But we really need to work hard to get this all pulled together into a cohesive and strategic plan. And so we're beginning that effort and hope to continue that as our primary mission here in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Council Belmont. I guess the thing I would just add to that, which is weighing heavily on my mind, is that Red Cross is beginning to transition some people out of temporary motel sheltering. There's a variety of categories, people with an incomplete address or that can't verify their address, but in addition, people that their house is, I forget the exact term, but basically visually okay. So as you do a drive-by or something, it's still there. They are in process of trying to return those people here very shortly to their residences. However, you know, as we know, just because your house is visibly okay does not actually mean that it is safe to return to it. As there may be drinking water issues, there may be sanitation issues, as Director Husing always brings up with septic or those kinds of situations. I'm very worried about this specifically because we were having a difficult time getting the information from Red Cross on who these people are. So we don't have a list of who exactly those people are so that we can try to advocate for them or help them on, you know, still having temporary shelter for those that truly can't go back, even though their structure still may be standing. So I know several of us have tried to get that list, including our navigator has tried and is reaching out for help again. I know that our emergency manager has also tried to get it. So I feel like basically after this meeting is over, we still need to continue to work on that and into tomorrow morning, because I think they're trying to transition people out either tonight or tomorrow. And we still don't know who those people are unless they've come forward through Bethany or other sources and kind of self-identified.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, could I jump in on this? A couple of things.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, I've had people reach out to me. I was in contact with Bethany. We're talking about Bethany Grace Howe, our contract service navigator, who's actually employed by the Olalla Center, but on a contract that we, the county, are funding, and hearing the exact concerns that you have just raised. And you know, we may have limited power to influence this because, you know, it's a Red Cross operation, and given their inability or unwillingness to share this information with us, you know, I don't know how much we can directly impact it, but at the very least, we do have to, you know, and I'm glad to know we do have on the radar screen that we may be dealing within a matter of days with several people essentially being forced from their motel rooms and being told their only option is to go back to a home that they do not consider habitable or safe. And on the housing mission letter, you know, when I initially heard that we had not been approved by FEMA for a housing mission, I think my response was the same as with a lot of people. I think just bafflement more than anything else. So in trying to come up with strategies that might help push FEMA in the direction of a positive decision, one of the people I reached out to was the public affairs director at Oregon Housing and Community Services, who has been working directly with the governor's office and Oregon Emergency Management on this. And he said, well, you know, if your board would make a direct appeal to FEMA, that might be helpful. So as Mr. Belmont mentioned, we have sent off that letter. And even though it will be moving through official channels, I also earlier today reached out to the field representatives for Senator Merkley, Senator Wyden, Representative Schrader, who we all work with, sent them an electronic copy of the letter and said, hey, just want to alert you that this is going to be heading your way, and any help in moving the federal bureaucracy gears would really be appreciated. And I heard affirmative responses from all three of them. A definite commitment to advocate for Lincoln County and our specific need here.
Thank you for doing that, Commissioner Hall. And I would just add something that Council Belmont had said earlier about kind of the direct model versus rental assistance. I'm real concerned that if the rental assistance model is what we kind of get stuck with, that there is no rentals.
Mm-hmm.
As you commented about. And so while I also have some concerns with sort of the direct model, and because we were one of the counties least impacted, that we sort of get placed on the back burner with those resources coming through, I'm real worried that if people have to go, find their own lodging or temporary housing, that we just don't have it. We didn't have it before. So I think there's no great option here, but I think we do need to continue to push FEMA for an answer, and also for a timeline on when they're going to be sort of making that decision, or when we're going to get some additional information from them. So,
and I think, commissioners, that's really what we're working on. There's not going to be one single answer that's going to work. It's going to be multiple options and alternatives, to fit the needs of various individuals and families. And the resources we have available. And speaking of resources, the other item that's related to housing that you wanted to discuss is now the Legislative E-Board has taken up and considered what's called Project Turnkey for wildfire response. And after a very lengthy discussion and really a much larger kind of proposal to address really what was seen as a gap statewide of about 10,000 needed shelter beds. And this is not just for the wildfire, but statewide also to deal with COVID, to decrease congregate shelter populations. The legislature was originally considering about $65 million. To allocate for some options for communities and community-based organizations to actually acquire and retrofit hotel and motel properties. This is something that was done in California to some great success, I think, down there. It's been in place for a little while. And so there was consideration of doing that here in Oregon. And although the details are a little bit unclear, we have the proposal that was considered, and I think possibly Commissioner Hall may have more information than I do currently, but at least I have the original copy of the proposal that was made to the E-Board that apparently did pass. They are providing $30 million granted through the Department of Administrative Services, the Oregon Community Foundation, for local grants to both purchase and renovate properties and support efforts there, but only in wildfire affected areas, and that would include Lincoln County. So yeah, I'm going to stop there and just say that you guys, probably between the two of you, the commissioners, you have more details than I do on this and may want to discuss those details. But what I'm hoping at the result of this is there's obviously a lot of questions around this. Another opportunity, and where does this fit into both our short-term housing needs and maybe into some other longer-term plans here. And mostly what we're looking for is some direction for staff. Is this something, as we get more information on this, you want staff to pursue? And if so, we will diligently pursue this.
Yeah, thank you for that, Council Belmont. So just for a little bit of clarity, for people that didn't, follow along in the play-by-play, there was 2 proposals given to the E-Board. One did not go through, which was the statewide program, and one did go through for wildfire-affected counties. So, like I said, 2 different proposals. One was successful and one was not. But the one for wildfire counties was. Just a big thank you to those on the E-Board who did vote for that, including representatives and Representative Gomberg and Senator Roblin as well. So thanks to them. From a, do we want staff to, track this, look into it, and likely put together a proposal? I think there's lots of things to discuss, obviously. I did get a copy of the final language that was approved, because a lot can happen even at the e-board between what was proposed and what actually gets voted on or comes through. So I do have a copy of that. I sent it to our legal team earlier today to start kind of digging through and looking at. But I do think, at least for my end, and I'm sure Commissioner Hall is there with me, that we do want to continue to pursue this, look at it, understand it, especially as things begin to roll out here. With that, today's the first working day, since Friday when that's happened. So there's still some information kind of coming out. But my sense is we absolutely want to keep this on the agenda, understand what was passed and figure out the best way forward. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I am with you 100%. I want us today to give staff a clear, unequivocal direction to begin and really continue due diligence on what the sideboards on this program will be, what the benefits, what the potential risks are, because I was involved kind of in the lead of the AOC group that was Association of Oregon Counties, along with League of Cities, that was heavily advocating for this. So I know a lot of commissioners were also working on it as well, including you. But, I'm looking at material that went to the emergency boards, material I got from Oregon Community Foundation. And as was mentioned, originally this was a single $65 million package to address both fire victims and, the broader context of street homelessness. And the decision was made before it went to the E-board to split it into these two buckets of money. And as mentioned, the one for fire counties passed, the other didn't. So the estimate, if the whole thing had passed, was talking about acquiring 18 to 20 properties and 1,000 units at a cost of $65,000 per unit, which, just one of the many reasons that this, I think, was attractive to a lot of people was, if anybody knows anything about the cost of new construction, that you could not come close to creating a newly built rental unit for anything close to that. And I believe, that's factoring in the reality that any hotel or motel property that's on the market, it's very unlikely that it's, even though it's called Project Turnkey, that it's going to be turnkey ready. So there's going to have to be some maintenance. And of course, there's going to be a need for ongoing operational costs. Now, when it was originally a single package, that of the total amount of money, that 15% was going to be allocated for operating costs. So if that carries forward into the actual program, we're talking about $4.5 million statewide. And again, how would that translate to, say, if the decision is made for us to move forward locally with an effort to acquire a property and bring it into this program? What kind of operating money do we have for the short term? And what kind of guarantees, or at least potential sources, would we have for continued operational cost once the initial operating money runs out? Let's see, a couple of other things. I'm looking at notes of the E-board. Properties would be owned by localities or community entities. There would be a reversionary clause. Essentially, if, say, a community buys a motel and for whatever reason the need's not there, they just can't handle the operations, that there would be a requirement to divest the property and return it to the state. People may be wondering why a private foundation, Oregon Community Foundation, is involved instead of a state agency. And frankly, I can speak from the standpoint of the Oregon Housing Stability Council chair. Oregon Housing and Community Services is really doing a lot of great things right now. Over the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions, the legislature has pumped historic amounts of money into that agency, not only to expand existing programs, but stand up new programs as well. And, frankly, they said they wouldn't have the bandwidth to take this on. But Oregon Community Foundation is the state's single largest private foundation. They are going to provide fiscal oversight, due diligence, administration, and, frankly, they're going to be putting together an advisory committee to shape the application and selection process. So a lot of the questions that we are going to need to be answering in our own due diligence, we don't know, what the answers will be until we have the sideboards. Although a letter from Max Williams, the foundation president, does indicate that cities, counties, housing authorities, tribal communities, and nonprofit organizations would all be eligible, and co-applicants could be considered as well. So jumping way down the road, say if we wanted to apply in partnership with one of our local nonprofits, in partnership with a city or with the tribe, at least that's something that could be a possibility. The other thing I think I've shared with staff, but let the public know as well, this isn't going to happen overnight, but frankly, for a government program, the directive is, knowing the urgency of this, is to get it moving and get dollars out the door quickly. And Oregon Community Foundation's tentative target at this point for making funding awards is December 15th. So a little over 6 weeks from now. So even though we don't know what the application process is, I think we've got enough collective wisdom that among staff and among our board that we can, that I think we can almost anticipate what some of the likely requirements are going to be and start thinking a couple of steps ahead. So when the application process does open up, staff can really bring us a well-reasoned proposal on whether or not we should pursue this and, the reasons why.
Okay. Council Belknap, does that give you kind of a direction?
It does, and we'll continue to update you at weekly board meetings.
Great, thank you. And I would just add that I think understanding as you dive into the FEMA world more to talk about housing, I think also understanding how this potentially fits in to that. And, can we use FEMA direct assistance to local governments to pay for, say, a housing coordinator or whatever we want to call that person that would be kind of be managing that. I think that's additional thing to kind of find out is how this might fit in to some of those other funding sources to keep it kind of operational as well as maintenance that might come up. Okay, I think we made it through the Echo Mountain Complex Fire update. So moving on to B, Lincoln County Public Health COVID-19 update. I see both our assistant director and our director. I'm not sure who wanted to start with the update, but I'll turn it over to both of you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Florence Porta, Deputy Director of Public Health for Lincoln County. So one really big news is that, as you can see on the screen, we have a new COVID-19 data dashboard that is very extensive and that was put together in collaboration with the regional epidemiologist in Benson County. What is really great about this dashboard is that it's pretty interactive, and we can demonstrate a few things. And it's also the program has been created in such a way that when Peter in Bentham County updates the data, pretty much the dashboard updates automatically. So there is a decrease in caseload and workload on our team side, which is really good. So I can walk you through the data. So to date, as of Saturday, we had 515 cases and presumptive cases in Lincoln County. As you can see, the average number of new cases each day over the past 2 weeks compared to the previous 2 weeks is a little bit on the increase, but really slightly. And I also wanted to say that compared to not last week, but the week before, last week was pretty calm in terms of new cases reported to us, which is good news. Same thing if you look to the right of this average daily case reported, you can see that we had a slight increase of number of people who had been diagnosed with COVID-19 over the past 2 weeks compared to the previous 2 weeks. Overall, since the beginning of October, we have 30 positive cases and 3 additional presumptive cases. So then you have an interesting graph to the left of the page, really showing you kind of a weekly number of cases, and as you can see, our numbers is nicely decreasing and kept under wraps. So we can go to the demographics, Casey, if you'd like. So this page is giving you a sense of who in the population has been most affected. We have a how can I say? I'm sorry, I'm not finding my words, but pretty much both female and males are affected in a similar proportion, if I may. So symptom status, we definitely are picking up on mostly on the symptomatic cases rather than asymptomatic cases, and my assumption here would be that if one would come up with symptoms, it is more likely that the person would go for a test, and therefore, their status would be found out. Number of new cases by months and age of cases. So without any real change, we looked at, I really wanted to see if we saw since April kind of a change of what age group is leading in terms of cases, and we looked at that last week, and the 18 to 29 years old are definitely still. As you can also see, I mean, the proportion of tests has the number of tests over time has very much decreased, which could also explain why we're not getting more positive cases reported to us. Yeah, we can move on. Okay, so those are the reopening metrics that we started presenting on last week for the schools. So as you know, Lincoln County School District is under the K-3 exemption. And so there is a nice kind of summary of what those metrics are and what they mean. And then you can see the number of new cases per 100,000 in Lincoln County. The light blue is the past week, and then the darker blue is the most recent 3 weeks, which are going to be the weeks that we're most interested in terms of are we going to close or not the grades we have either in person or in a hybrid model. So the number of cases is going up a little bit, as you can see in October, and we're still below the red dotted line, so of 30 cases per 100,000. So we're good. And as you know or may not know, today was the first day of returning to school for first graders. So I hope it went well. Positive test rate has been fluctuating as well. As a reminder, the positivity rate might go up because our denominator number of tests being performed is getting smaller. So the more positive tests we might get, the higher the positive test rate. We can move on to the next page. So those are the public health indicators that you, I'm sure, used to look at very closely, especially that they were very linked to the Facebook opening. So as you can see, we're doing pretty good mostly. And same thing as we've said in the previous meetings, you know, when you see the higher percentage of increase in new cases, it's just because our numbers are really, really low. And therefore, if there is 1 or 2 or 3, the percentage increase can get really, really high, really, really fast. Okay, I think we can move on to the next. And this is notes about the dashboard, you know, some context around the data that I just presented. So an additional piece of information. So this dashboard is going to be updated every Monday and Thursdays. So at each board meeting, we'll have kind of the latest data available up to the Saturday before the board meeting. So that's that. The second piece of information that I wanted to share was the slight change in guidance for mask wearing by the Oregon Health Authority. You may have seen that the recommendation is if you ought to wear if you want to wear a face shield, it's recommended now that you wear a mask underneath it, unless, of course, you have a need for people to see your mouth, or you have a very, very difficulty breathing and things like that. But pretty much the recommendation is if you wear the face shield, please wear a mask underneath it. And then another piece is make sure that the mask you're wearing, if it is not an FDA approved mask, that it has at least 2 layers of material. So this is what I have. Rebecca, do you have anything else?
No, I think you hit all the points that I had on my list. So is there any questions? Oh yeah, this is going to get this little guideline here is going to be something that we get out to all of our county departments so that people understand which face coverings are recommended and which are not.
Thank you for that. I just want to say the new data dashboard is really, really nice. So thank you for working with, it sounds like Benton County, on doing that. I also really like seeing the, not just the metrics for our county, but in general, but also the metrics for schools being open. It's really nice to be able to see that and have it visualized. So thank you so much, Florence, for working on that. Really nice to be able to have that to look at. So just a big thank you on that. I will also say that the neck gaiter is my personal favorite. So it's a little crushed to see this on here, but I will give it up and you know, find a new favorite. So I will adapt.
Yeah. So just to clarify too, Peter Banworth, he is housed at Benton County Health Department, but the Tri-County, we all support him. So Lynn, Lincoln, and Benton County, we have, he's our regional health assessment, part of the health assessment team. So we were really very pleased that he finally got to a place where, well, we all got to a place, I guess, where we could really engage his services. So he is, we pay into his salary, so it's really nice that he's helping us do this data, and it really freed up several staff that were all contributing to getting our data updated. So this has been a real win-win, and I agree, Commissioner Jacobson, that it is really pretty too. So, and I think maybe a little bit easier because one thing we always wanted to be able to do is compare to the last time that we looked at the data, right? And so now this is a really clear indicator whether we're going up or down right away. So, yeah. And so just another plug, if I can, that this is a team sport trying to beat back COVID in our community. So it takes all of us to do our bit to wear those face coverings, to keep the 6-foot physical distance, and to make sure that we wash our hands because like Florence said, we're really excited that the first graders got to go back to school. And I think the plan is every 2 weeks, a new grade up through 3rd grade will go back to school. So we want to really do our bit in this community to make sure that goes successfully for our little kids who really need to have that interaction in the classroom. So thanks everyone for all that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you to the both of you and your whole team. I don't think we have enough thanks in our hearts to say thank you to them. And you might have seen my first grader running around as well. So that curious right now giving me candy. All right. Commissioner Hall, any questions for Rebecca or Florence?
No questions, I guess. Well, no, actually, I will have a question, but I want to echo my praise for the new dashboard. I think it is, you know, really visually attractive, which I think is important for the user to be able to, you know, essentially engage. You know, there's, I think, better functionality, more information available. All this is a good thing. And I almost, you know, I don't believe in jinxes, that sort of thing, but just, I think we should acknowledge the fact, I hear from some people who are quite concerned, and I think we all need to continue to be concerned about COVID. It's not going away, but they hear reports of it really surging in other places in the state, certainly other places in the country. You know, when there are reports that hospitals in Idaho and Utah are basically reaching 99% capacity in their intensive care units and talking about sending new COVID patients out of state, you know, that raises the alarm bells in the minds of members of the public, as well it should, but it seems like we continue to buck the trend. That doesn't mean we're down to 0 cases, and realistically we won't be, but you know, I'd appreciate both of you or either of you weighing in if you know, you feel, I guess, satisfied, comfortable, positive about the continued direction of our numbers and our ability to respond if heavens forbid, we do see a new surge.
Well, I hate to jinx us too, or to even, toot our horn.
Yeah.
Because that's a kind of a dangerous place to go. Like I said, this is a team sport, and I don't mean just the public health team, but I mean the whole community. So it takes all of us to not get too pandemic weary here, and continue to be vigilant. And I have to say, when I am out in the world, and even I went to a large grocery store for the first time this weekend, I saw everybody wearing a mask and a face covering of some sort. So that does make me feel like we have done a really good job in Oregon of getting that message out, and that people are finally understanding that wearing a face covering really is protecting your neighbors. And so that's a really good thing to do. So that's kind of how it feels to me. And to answer your other question, if we were to get hit with a large outbreak, I feel fairly comfortable that we have shored ourselves up, that we could handle it now. And we continue to get community-based organizations on board that will be helping us, especially with the essential needs. Some are interested in helping us with contact tracing. The tribe has been carved out, and anybody that gets a test at the tribal clinic, they will be doing all of that case investigation and contact tracing themselves. So we have sort of expanded our network of people in the community that are going to be helping the county public health department. So that feels good to me, like we could maybe hold up a little bit stronger in the next go around if that comes to us.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, both of you, for being here. And again, thanks for the great new dashboard. That's wonderful. Okay, I think back to the agenda. I think the last thing we have for today to discuss is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR for short. I think Christina Shear is going to be presenting that.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be brief. I know this is a long meeting and you've got more weighty things to discuss, but I am pleased to report that Lincoln County has received another Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. As a side note, normally we get this news much earlier in the year. Clearly COVID has caused delays in many things throughout public life. And this is one of them. As a matter of fact, we have auditors coming in to work on our audit for June 30th, 2020. So this is 1 year back that we're talking about here. And I want to point out that we take extra effort to go beyond minimum accepted reporting principles to achieve this to apply for this achievement. It feels really good to see our work recognized by the GFOA. They are the highest authority for government reporting. It means that we've demonstrated the high standards of reporting transparency. Our management team, finance staff, and community can really be proud of this. It's not something that every organization does, and Lincoln County has consistently done it for a very long time. And I don't actually have the number of years offhand, but it is more than a decade. So this is a consistent reporting achievement for us, and it's something we intend to continue for as long as we can.
Yeah, I believe we've already given Casey Miller, our Public Information Director, direction to put out a news release on this, and let's track down that number, because I don't know, maybe Mr. Bell has a better memory than I do, but this is my 16th year in office, and I know we were receiving this even before I was in office. So it is a long tradition. And Christina, I don't know if I could ask you, just if you could briefly try to translate into terms for the public, excellence in financial reporting. on the surface, that sounds very good, but, what does this represent? What extra steps do we have to go through to qualify for this? And maybe how does it provide the public with more access or more transparency to our budget and audit information?
Well, it applies to our year-end financial statements, and the minimum standards will give you your standard balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flows, and notes, and the auditor's attestation that those are correct. In order to get this achievement award, you need to provide a great deal of additional information, primarily in the area of demographics, things that are specific to the organization. For one example, primary employers. How dependent are you on a particular employer? How dependent are you on a particular revenue source? So it just provides an additional degree of information in that package above and beyond just a simple balance sheet. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me.
If I might weigh in, this is Wayne, just in terms of how long we've received this reward. I actually just found an email that said that in 2013, we received the certificate for the 21st consecutive year. So it goes back to the early 90s. And I do recall that, I think it was started when Glenn Morris was the finance director, is when we first applied for this. So it's been going on for quite a few years.
I'm sorry, if I recall correctly, it was former Commissioner Don Lindley who, it was actually kind of his initiative, supported by the other commissioners at the time, that we pursue this. Not every county qualifies for it. And I think in terms of, accountability to the public, and I'm glad the tradition is continuing.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. And that's a lot of consecutive years to have received this. So, all right. Well, thank you, Christina. And I know you're relatively new here, but thank you for doing this for us and carrying on with that. All right. Next up, commissioner reports. I feel like all the things I needed to say and report on, I have already done that. So I don't have anything extra to mention. Commissioner Hall.
Same here.
Okay, great. I think that's all on our agenda for today. Our next scheduled meeting, if Casey can scroll up there a little bit. There we go, is Monday, November 2nd, 2020 at 3 p.m. Again, we'll be doing things virtually. That will be the next Board of Commissioners meeting room. Just want to wish everybody a safe Halloween. And just remember that we are in COVID times here. We've just decided as a family to eat our candy now instead of doing a lot of trick-or-treating. So we'll just be eating candy at home. But have a happy Halloween and a safe one. And we'll see everyone back here on Monday, November 2nd. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Mom.